It's October 11th, and it is a chilly day outside. It's sunny. It's Friday. My name is Mike May, and I'm here at the Spartan Update Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Ruffy, also known as Fabian Waters, and we got our amazing guest, Mrs. Lauterwasser.
No.
So, let's just talk about some things. What got you into teaching Spanish?
All right, well, teaching was the thing that I was going to go for, but I was going to be an art teacher. So then there were cuts in the budget, and I figured, you know what? I'm going to try something that's going to give me some security. I went to college a little late in life. So to me, the job security was like a main thing, and I wanted to make sure that I was going to have a job to be able to provide for my kids. So I switched to the next thing that I felt comfortable teaching. And I'm a Spanish speaker, so I figured that would be the way to go. And I think this was the best decision, so it just happened by destiny. I really think that you are put on this earth to do what you're supposed to do. And that switch from art to Spanish was just meant to be because I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how long have you been teaching Spanish here?
Here, 10 years.
Okay.
It's
How
gonna
long?
be 11 in March.
How long have you just been teaching Spanish?
14.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us how you kind of found your space in Ocean Township?
Well, it was challenging at the beginning. I'm not gonna lie. I came in to replace in the middle of the year, and there was a lot of issues with back in the day behaviors and why not, and being the new teacher taking a class in the middle of the year, it was kind of hard. But little by little, I started learning how to connect with my students, and I think that connection takes you a long way. So I actually learned that when you have issues with behavior in the classroom, it's not a personal thing. It's actually more like at this age, especially at this age, it's just a way for them to express frustration. It really is. It has to do with many things. It could be frustration at home, could be frustration at school, could be frustration, personal frustration, anything like that. Just they show it on, teenagers show it on the way that they behave. So I learned not to take anything personal and being able to move on and build relationship with those kids, even though sometimes I got a lot of pushback. But I think that that was the key, just build that relationship and that rapport with the kids. And they turn around.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I haven't had any situations in the past where a kid has not turned around for me. And turning around doesn't mean getting an A in my class per se. Turning around meaning, you know, kind of like getting to understand things that they were doing wrong, and they would change their behavior eventually. So, yeah, that was one of the things. Then I am very lucky and blessed to have a great department. We're very close. All of us are extremely close. And I think that helped too, because we always get together at lunch. We actually share our experiences. We always exchange ideas, and we support each other. And that's like a major thing. It's like a little family kind of thing. So yeah. It's awesome.
I've definitely noticed. I mean, this is why I wanted you to have you on the podcast, because the Spanish department and just language department in general hasn't really been touched on the podcast too much. And I think that you guys are the most tight-knit department in Ocean Township.
For sure. I was just wondering, out of curiosity, who do you think is the best Spanish speaker of all the world language teachers in the Spanish department?
Miss Tevar.
Miss Tevar?
Yeah.
Yeah, you think so?
I have a lot of respect for her. Yes, she is not a native speaker, but if I have a question, I know she's the person to go to. She knows the grammar inside and out, and she knows her stuff, and she's the most dedicated person I ever met. I have a lot of respect for her. Yes,
I didn't expect such a quick answer. That's good.
Yes.
I honestly was thinking that, because I was like, if she's not a native speaker, she would definitely have studied like
exactly,
hard.
And not just that, but I mean, she lived in Spain a few years, so she's very good at the pronunciation and whatnot. But I think that, and I always tell my kids that I teach the advanced levels. I had you in my advanced level class. And I always tell my native speakers, this class is going to be hard because now they have to rewire everything they already learned. All those mistakes that they were making when they were speaking out with, with their families, they have internalized. And it's really hard for them to dissect the language and try to fix those errors. And they have been accustomed to make them over and over again. And that is one of the hardest things for a native speaker. But when you learn the language from scratch, basically, you learn it the way it's supposed to be learned. Mm-hmm. And that's I think it's like a major advantage that my students have when they don't know the language and
Definitely.
They learn it. Yeah,
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
So I also know you have a little bit of a background in special education. Can you tell me about that and just integration with that?
Yes. During my first year, I got a job in Lacey Township. I was working in the middle school, and I just came out of college, and I feel that I learned the most. Nothing about, I'm not talking bad about my college at all, but I feel that our program lacked a little bit of, I would say that real life experience. I feel that teachers usually are sent to the real world without a lot of the real experience that you need. You do your student teaching, but there's no way you're going to get all that experience in just 3 months. So I feel that you learn a lot when you actually go to the real world. And you're on your own, and you have to survive. And I had my first student with severe autism, and I had never been exposed to that. Just to let you know, in my country, I'm from Ecuador, we never really saw anybody with special needs in the real world, because in that case, it was sort of like a shame. Very, very sad, but that's the reality. Nowadays, it's getting better. But back in the day, you will never see a person with autism out in the real world because the family will have a little bit of a shame, per se, or they will keep them in the house so they wouldn't bother other people, which they didn't have the opportunity to actually socialize or learn from other people or get the training or the socialization or the treatment that they needed, because they need a lot of special, like personal skills especially, to develop those skills. And I had my first encounter with this child, and she was genius. I mean, I was blown away because I had never, you hear the word autism and you're like, oh, okay, so they can learn that much kind of thing. You don't really, that's the idea that you grow up if you're not exposed to it. And then this kid, she was not able to socialize that much. She was very limited verbally. But then when she got to my class, and I had her only I think it was 3 times a week or something like that, because it was the middle school. If I would show her 20 words, she will perfectly, with perfect pronunciation, she would recall each one of those words, every time. And my other kids who were normal, that were not in the spectrum, would never be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And she would have this retention. She was able to memorize. She was like a genius. And so it fascinated me because I was like, wow, it's sort of they're like the what you guys would say download genius, they don't show it, and because they don't know how. They have the ability to block everything else and being able to put all of their attention to it. And I fell in love with it, and I decided that I was going to go for a master's degree on it, and that's exactly what I did. I just went back into college immediately, and I got my master's degree in special ed. And every time I would go and do observations for the classes, because it's required for your master's degree, I would fall in love more and more about it. So every time I get that special ed class that I get every 2 years or so, I have one right now, that's my favorite time, because I feel that these kids get the opportunity to actually learn something new. I get the opportunity to teach them some social skills as well, not just Spanish, but a little bit of social skills. Having, reward systems and whatnot helps a lot with them. But it's one of my, I would say a little challenging, but my favorite. Yeah. And I would have to say my aides are like my treasure, because I have nothing but good things to say about those guys. I have more adults in my room than I have children sometimes. And I have nothing bad to say about any of those aides. They are incredible, the ones that I have had in my classroom. And the ones that I have in this classroom right now, I think that they deserve all of the recognition, because there's no way I would be able to do anything. I would not be able to cover any of the stuff that I cover without them. There's no way.
Yeah, those aides definitely know them best. They know
Oh, yeah.
all their interests. They know what they're looking for.
Yeah, and then that's why I actually I always try to make them feel that they have a say in my class, because they know them better, and I know that. I spend 85 minutes with these kids, 83 minutes with these kids. I don't spend all day with them. So when I see a behavior, I let them tell me, I ask them, what do you think it should be done? Like, how can we? And they are really great at it. They are always, I don't intervene. I know that sometimes they have to, guide that child into what they are supposed to be doing, because they probably deviate. And there is one thing about a special education teacher: if you are planning to go into that field, you can't be territorial. There's no way. So you have to be able to let the control go and be able to work with other human beings that know these children better than you do. Even though they don't have a certification, they'll probably do a better job than you do if they actually knew the language. So, and I'm aware of that.
Yeah, it's definitely an amazing field to go down. I'm going down the special education route, and I'm super excited to start that. So it's an amazing thing to hear from you that you enjoy it so much. So
Yeah.
it's a good feeling.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Yes.
Yes. So I wanted to ask some questions about your upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us where you're from, how you grew up?
All right, so I'm from Ecuador. I lived there until I was 19. Typical Hispanic household. Well, by typical, I say typical for us, not the American way. Meaning, family structure is different. And as you have heard me say in my classes, because I'm very honest when it comes to that, I mentioned when we started looking into roles of men and women, yes, we live in a very macho society in Latin America. So I would say, yeah, my father wasn't in there. So he had another family, and that was a very common. When I say Hispanic, that was a very common. Unfortunately, that is a very common trend. Thankfully, it's not the only trend. There is men who are really good men, and they grow up and they love their children. Why not? That wasn't my case, but my mother was a incredible mom, and she was a very strong woman, and she was able to hold up her end, and make sure that we never needed anything. So yes, I mean, at the same time, I would say it was a little bit of relief to see that my mother was also a very respectful woman, and I think that was one thing that got embedded in me. And I always tell my students that, I respect you, you respect me back. That's it. That's all I ask for. And I think it works. It really does. Because I'm in charge of the class doesn't mean that I have the right to disrespect you. And I take that very seriously. So that I learned from my mom. My mom was very, I would say, it's funny because I look back now, and she lives with me now. She's 80. And I look back and I'm like, wow, she's like the best example of what a good mom is, because she taught me not to be possessive of my children's lives. And it's one really hard thing to do for a parent, to let go when the kids are adults, of that control. And that was one thing that my mom did. She raised me very strictly until I was an adult. And she saw that I was able to make my own decisions and take responsibility for my own acts. And then at that point, she would never criticize. My mother is the kind of person that if you go and you tell her, could be anything, she will never criticize your opinions. She will never criticize your choices. She will never criticize anything. It could be the worst thing that you could have done. She will be there to listen to you, but she will never, ever, ever make you feel like you made a mistake, because she feels that should be on you to fix it or not. So that was one of the things. And again, like I said, typical Latin American, society. I came to the United States for that reason. I was trying to get away from the macho part of the society, of the culture. I was expected, and I knew it. I was expected to be home, have children, not have an education. For some reason, I always liked to be a student. I always did. Now I'm getting old, so now I don't like it anymore. But I don't want to be a student anymore. I'm like, I have a problem remembering things now. But back in the day, yes, I love being a student. I was always an A student in my schooling. However, like I said, we don't recognize learning disabilities. I had ADHD my whole life, and I struggled tremendously to have those A's. And I never realized how hard it was until I actually started teaching here, and I was a special ed teacher, and I started seeing all these things about ADHD. I was like, okay, I fit the bill. I think I have it. And it's one of those things that, shape you. You start realizing how different things were so different when you were a kid until, from how things were when you were a kid until like nowadays, how things are changing so much, and it's good for the kids to be recognized or know those differences and how they learn and whatnot. So I would say my upbringing actually got me to where I am. I like to respect people and take responsibility of my acts.
No,
That's
definitely.
It. That's it.
Yeah. I was wondering, so you say you're from Ecuador, right?
Yeah.
And the Spanish that you teach here, is it Ecuador, is there like with accents and differences between like Dominican Spanish and Spanish in Spain and Spanish in Ecuador? Is there a big difference, or is it all like kind of very similar with what you teach and what you grew up with and what you know?
All right, so I try to keep an open mind when it comes down to language, because language is very personal, and each country is going to do their thing with the language. And I have to be, and that's one thing that I learned here, because growing up I didn't have internet, so I didn't have exposure to the real world per se. So for us, it was a very small world. When I came to the United States, I thought everything was like Ecuador. And then I had to open up my mind. I was like, okay, wait, that's not how it works. There are words in my country that are very offensive in other countries. They're simple words. And then, so I have to, yes, the grammar rules are the same for everybody, doesn't matter. But when it comes down to vocabulary, I have to be a little careful with that, because I know that certain countries will call one item different things, like a straw. Yeah. You can call it pajita, popote, for us it's sorbete. So it's like all these different things, but they mean the same thing. And it's not that they are wrong, it's just that that's the term they use there, and they are not wrong for using it. Yeah. So I have to be open-minded with that, but the grammar is the same for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I think it's really interesting. I love like the Dominican accent, the Dominican way. Do you have like a favorite kind of like Spanish accent?
Colombian accent.
The Colombian accent?
The Colombian accent is the most beautiful accent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. So you're from Ecuador, as you said, and how you speak is definitely native to your roots. How did you, what was the transition like coming from Ecuador to the United States, like when you finally made that jump?
Very difficult. I felt that even though there's a lot of toxic things about my culture, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of things that I feel that we need to change. We still have that community. We have a very strong community. Your neighbor is part of your family, literally speaking. So I grew up in a very neat community where my neighborhood knew exactly, which it wasn't a good thing when you were a teenager, by the way, because they would go and tell your mom what you were doing. And you did not know that they had eyes on you. You had no idea that somebody was watching you. You're like, ooh, and then you would get in trouble because they will go and tell your mom. But anyway, but you would have, and I was a good kid, but still got in trouble. For example, my grandmother stayed alone, living in her house. After we moved out, I came here. My mother came to help me, and then my nephew left, and so my grandmother stayed alone for a little bit. We knew our neighbors were watching her all the time. We knew that let's say, I don't know, they knew her routine. She would show up at the window every day at around 9:30. If they didn't see her there, they were like, oh my God, something happened to Senora Maria. Like, we need to go and knock on the door, and we need to go and call this daughter. Like they would get phone calls to my mom all the time when she started having problems with dementia and whatnot. We started knowing this because of the neighbors getting in touch with my mom, calling her and telling her, hey, something is wrong, this is happening. And my aunt was there and visiting her every day, but still, that's the way we saw it. And then I came to the United States, and I found a very individualistic community. I feel that that was one of the biggest shock I got, because I felt that neighbors are not as open to have that relationship with your family and with the neighbor and why not. If anything, I see a lot of people being very territorial with their property, and there is a lot of disputes with properties and why not. And I find that that used to be one thing, though. I do see it in movies. I don't know if maybe it's a movie thing, but I do see it back in the day.
I don't speak to my neighbors at all.
So I don't know. Like in the movies, they always show like the neighbors, and I'm like, I don't know. Is that Hollywood? Like I don't understand it because I never saw it. But my ex-husband said that his neighborhood was like that. So I wonder if it has to do with just the luck.
I think it has to do with the time as well.
The
also,
timing.
Like currently,
Yeah, like the 70s, the 80s.
Yeah.
He was in the 70s probably.
I feel like if it's also like, if you're in a neighborhood that's very like, there's people in Ocean Township that have been in Ocean Township forever, like generations. I feel like if you have like a very generational neighborhood, like I feel Wayside is more that way than like I'm by like Oakhurst, by like the beach, people come and go with like where we're at. But like Wayside, just like people that have generationally been there, I feel like it'd be more like that. But
I think also, I think now a lot of people in comparison to the past, people are very strong about their like beliefs and don't want to like spend time with people that are different from them in that way, so it's harder to make a community when there's so much like people are like hating towards each other for believing certain things or like whatever it may be.
And that is so true. I think that's actually one of the things that is causing a lot of division. I think that was like the biggest shock for me. And I think it has a lot to do with also the majority of the population, because you gotta remember, we don't have that many different religions or different things in my country that would divide you. Most of the population, I would say 90% of the population, it's Catholic. So you don't have anything to fight with. Neighborhoods are usually secluded on their own income. Schools are never there is no diversity in the schools. You will go to school to whatever your parents can afford. So if your parents can afford a really good school, you will go with kids who are in the same income bracket. So when I was growing up, there was no bullying, but not because we're better people. It just wasn't any difference. We used uniforms. So there was no, oh, well, look at what she's wearing. There was none of that. There was a bus that will come and get you, or you will have somebody that will actually do like that service for that neighborhood, and they will take the kids to the school. And the school doesn't have to be in the same area. You could drive like, an hour to get to school, or you could just walk depending on how close you were to the school. So it wasn't a district thing. It wasn't separated by districts like it's here. As a matter of fact, it's funny because when one of my kids needed to go to school here, when I got here, my nephew was a teenager and he was sent, and he stayed with me and I finished raising him. And when I started looking for a school, I actually started calling other schools thinking that it was the same way that it was in Ecuador. And they were like, where do you live, ma'am? I was like, oh, well, I'm in Eatontown. They're like, yeah, you don't live in the area. You can't bring your kid here. I was like, wait a minute. What?
Yeah, it's like you have to pay if you want to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and I had no idea how that worked. And I had to actually find out, and they actually told me that, well, if you're in Eatontown, then you have to go to, Mammoth Regional. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, where is that? Like, I couldn't, and this is the time before internet was a thing, so I couldn't Google it, like I was like, wow, like this is difficult. It was kind of hard to adjust to those things and how everything is like very set in stone kind of thing. Like I couldn't understand why I couldn't send my kid to another school.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what's the biggest difference between the U.S. being such a melting pot and where we find difference in each other, and that's kind of like beautiful in its own way. That is where a divide can start, is because we are all so different here.
Yes.
Like
exactly.
this is, I mean, just Ocean Township in general, like even our school, like is probably so much, there's so much more diversity than like it would have been in Ecuador.
Exactly.
Or what like your upbringing was, so.
Exactly, and like what you said is beautiful, and that's the one thing that I think that we need to start embracing. When I have a kid right now in my class who is Jewish, and his mom is a rabbi, and you know, I love to have students who are so much into the religion because I want to learn about it. Like I want to know, you know, like okay, it's Rosh Hashanah, but what is it? What do you do? Like, and I know I can go onto the internet, but there is nothing better than having the person from it to explain it to you. And it does two things for you. It opens your mind, builds a relationship with the student, and the kid feels good because he feels recognized. Because we're always celebrating Christmas and we're celebrating all these other things, but those kids who have like the Muslim religion or they are Jewish, they don't have that much of a public, you know, recognition where these things are in your face all the time. Like every time there is like a break for Rosh Hashanah, even my husband goes like, "Why you're off?" I'm like, "What is Rosh Hashanah? Duh." And he's like, "Well, I didn't know that." I'm like, "Well, exactly, you didn't know that, you know." So there is not that much like exposure per se, and I think that that's one of the things that needs to be embraced. You know, like I'm actually planning to. Now that Christmas is coming up, I'm planning to start, you know, doing things, you know, that would include populations, not just the Jewish community, but also the kids who are Muslim, you know, like start sharing things that have to do with their holidays so they can feel integrated, you know. I think it's important.
Do you feel that world language is a thing like that is open to everybody? It's very like anybody can learn a different language, so it's very, I'd say it's a very open thing, and I think that's kind of amazing to have.
And not just that, with language comes culture, with language comes beliefs, with language comes, there's so many things that come with language, and I think that's the one thing that makes what I do very rewarding, because it's not just teaching you grammar, it's not just teaching you to communicate, but it just opens your mind to other things. So there's kids who are not superstitious. I'm super superstitious. Like I'm that kind of person that I'm like, oh my God, a broken mirror. Like, oh geez, like you know, like I'm doing the dance and I'm putting like the holy water on it. Like I'm that person.
I remember you saying that.
I'm that person. Like I have a problem with the elf on the shelf, because we have a thing called duende in my country that is like an evil entity that will come out. It looks like a little man that goes around like pinches you at the middle of the night. Like, oh yeah, it's terrifying. So when I look at the elf in the shelf, I'm like, oh, ew, you know, because to me that's like culturally, I'm like, oh no, if that thing moves, like there is no way I'm going into that room again. Like it's like I have my kids' dolls inside like a box with heavy things on top, because you know, there's no way they're getting out in the middle of the night. No, they're not moving. They're just not going. Yeah. So, you know, like I'm that kind of person. And I think it's important to understand where those things come from. You know, it's not misinformation. It's not lack of education. It's none of that. It's just the way you are bringing in your culture is. And it's good to it's actually fun. Yeah. It's actually fun. That's one of my most, I would say, favorite units to teach when on your class, like when we did Myths and Legends, you know, it's one of my favorite things, because you get to speak about these things, and these are culture. This is what makes culture rich.
Yeah. May I ask, what's one culture that maybe you haven't been able to learn enough about that you are more interested in, or one that you know about but you haven't been able to experience fully? Is there anything like that, somewhere you'd like to go, some maybe festivals or events that are part of a certain culture that you'd like to experience someday?
You know what, I'm going to be honest with you, I had never thought about it. You know, I want to travel, that I know.
Yeah.
I want to travel. I want to go, maybe I would say, you know, I have so many students from the Philippines, and they talk about, you know, their beliefs, and I find a lot of things from the Italians as well that are very similar to Hispanic culture. Yeah. You know, I would love to see how similar they are. and I think that's that sense of community and family. That's the one thing that really attracts me to them. You know, the Filipino community and the Italians are very similar, very superstitious, both of them. And I wonder where is that divide, if there is any, because I find that there is a lot of similarities between the three of them. I would say Italy, maybe that would be the Italian culture. That's the one thing that I like, or the Filipino culture. I think that those are the two places I would love to visit to see, you know, how much they go onto that sense of community. I think that's like the major thing for me. Like I feel that I always believe in like numbers make a lot of force. I think that numbers, there is power in numbers. There is a thing that you will never, and I was raised that way, you will never not give food, not share food. That food is like the one thing that I will always be proud to share. You know, there is no, that to me is like a sin. Oh my gosh, you know, like you had food and you didn't share. You know, like even my kids are like, but mom, I bought it. I'm like, I don't care, I'm here. You know, I want some, you know, and if I bought it, you know, you can have some, you know, it's like a community thing, especially with food. It's like a thing with me. I don't know why. And it's not like, you know, I grew up with any lack of it. It's just like the culture. That's the upbringing. You know, you have food, you share with anybody that's in the room, no matter what. No matter how hungry you are, if somebody walks in, you're sharing whatever you're eating. And that's beautiful. I think that's very beautiful. And that I see it with Italian culture as well.
So a question I have is, obviously when you coming to America, it's a big cultural shock. Is there any things now that you've been settled in America and you've basically like spent your life here that like you can remember back home? You're like, there's some cultural things that you wish would have crossed over, like some things that you loved back home that we could have here?
The sense of community, that. I feel that, like I said, it's a cultural thing. Nothing wrong with being individualistic. I feel that when I was going to college and I was doing my master's degree, I came across this, because they were talking about differences in the classroom, cultural differences in the classroom, and I came across this journal that they was talking about why is that so many of these Hispanic kids who come from Hispanic households that have been, you know, their parents are immigrants, don't do much to be leaders. And I think the reason is because of the culture itself. That's what they were talking about. They were saying that the American culture usually tries to raise you to be a leader, and leaders are supposed to lead. So therefore, you don't have anybody around you to do it. You are graced to be a leader. You're supposed to stand on your own. You're supposed to be able to do it yourself. In our culture, we do the complete opposite. It's like we help each other. It's sort of like a whole group going together, you know, either up or down, but we're all going together, you know. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes it stops the Hispanic community from getting into leadership in these countries, because we have that mentality that we have to teach our kids to be a community instead of being the one, you know, taking that community ahead. That's what they say, that's the reason why, you know, you don't see that many people from our culture in power. And I think they are spot on. And I think that's one of the things that is missing, that I wish I could see a little more here. I think it's changing, though. I think it's changing. I have seen a change. I have seen a switch a little bit, good and bad. Social media is doing a major impact on that. If you use it the right way, this phone can actually help you build a little bit of community on it, because now you can be in touch and you can actually share somebody who needs help, and then people will come together with it. But I think that we still need to work on that. I think that it will be a great thing to be united again. And like you mentioned, there is so much division now. Unfortunately, you know, it's something that we need to still working on. And that's the one thing that I miss the most. Also, the family, I would say, see, I have a mother who lives with me, and I have a sister who's disabled. And I make sure that always take care of her. You know, I always make sure that I take care of them. And I think it's that the way that brought me up. Like, I think that that's the one thing that I see a lot of nursing homes here, and I understand it's really hard, really, really hard to, and I get it, because that's the reason, that's why I'm saying I'm not criticizing, because I know that the economy here is so difficult for you to actually stop working, to actually take care of your parents or take care of your disabled sister. Or you can't do it. There is a point in life where you have to go to these places to put your loved one there, because you can't afford to live on your own. That's one thing that doesn't happen in Ecuador. In Ecuador, the economy, even though it's an underdeveloped country, you're able to have a little more leisure time. It's weird. I don't understand that, how it works. I don't understand the economics of it. I think it's funny. But yeah, I mean, we find a way to keep everybody in there, and it's basically because we can't afford to put somebody in a nursing home, because we do have them, but it's very expensive. But then that sense of community, everybody jumps in to help. You know, the neighbor comes in to help. The extended family comes in to help. So there is not that much need to put your loved one in a nursing home. Just 2 years ago, I had to put my sister in a nursing home, and it was a very difficult, process. I was very emotional, because to me, I felt like I was letting her down, and I had to do a lot with that community sense. But I couldn't afford to, take off and take care of her and take care of my mom, and why not? So there was no other choice. So I get it. I understand where it comes from. But yeah, that's the one thing that I miss the most, is that freedom of enjoying your time. Like, if you go to Ecuador, you actually see people going out to take a walk and relax after work.
Yeah.
And, like, you see the parks are full, and, the kids are playing. And, in here, I don't know if it's because it's so cold sometimes, and, people don't want to go out. At least I hate the cold. I was complaining about it this morning. And, there is, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's the weather.
Well,
I don't know.
In the area that you lived in, was it more like cityscape? Like, could you walk to a store if you wanted to from where you were? Or was it, like, very just...
Rural.
Like rural.
Oh, I was a city girl.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was
yeah,
in the
yeah,
city.
yeah.
Yes, and in my country, usually you have like what they call ciudadelas, which is like little neighborhoods, and
Yeah.
they will call them. They have their own name, so we'll
Yeah.
know if you say, "I used to live in Alborada." So if you know the Alborada, then they will know what section of the city you will have to go.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
like, if you live in the city, of course, like, there's definitely like a community, you meet people,
Exactly.
but kind of in an area here in like this part of like Jersey, I feel like everything's very like spread out.
Yeah,
it's
but
hard.
that's the thing. In my country, even in the little towns like that,
Yeah.
even if there is a very impoverished town, because it's the opposite in my country. If you live outside of the city and you live in the tiny little towns, that's like the most impoverished area.
Yeah.
There is no infrastructure, there is no running water, there is no electricity many times. So, but even then, you will have the little store in the middle of the town. I mean, you see that across. Like, people would actually do things for leisure. They
Yeah.
will go out for a little walk, and they will just sit down and have a meal together. Or, that's the one thing that I think I miss the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that. I mean, that's such an amazing thing to have.
Yeah, it's definitely a locational thing as well. Like, it kind of depends. That's I guess one of the good things about the U.S. If you go, it's so big, and there's so many. No matter where you go, it's very different. Whether if you're living in the city or in Florida or across on the West Coast, there's a lot of different communities and ways that it all works, I guess.
Yeah, different areas. But like you said, but if you come to the United States too, and
Yeah.
you don't have a car.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean,
yeah.
I suffered that before I started driving. You have to have a car. You
Yeah.
have to be able
Especially
to.
in Jersey, in this
Especially
area.
here, like, you will have to wait an hour to wait for that bus to come by.
Yeah.
In my country, because you are in the city's location, you're gonna have a bus that comes every 5 minutes, 10
And
minutes.
you could do a
and
lot of
whatnot.
walking.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
one thing. My mom is Romanian. One thing she hates about, because in Romania it's like they had the communism, and she lived in a city, so everywhere you would go, you could just walk,
Mm-hmm.
And when I go there, my cousins, all they do is walk. They just walk in circles around the city, like show different places. Here, I don't walk anywhere. I couldn't walk anywhere from my house unless I want to walk for like an hour to get to a Dunkin' Donuts, you know. So it's kind of it's hard, you know.
Yeah.
And I definitely would
Yeah.
appreciate it more if we could walk around places, you know, meet up with people, you know. It would be a much nicer community, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that you're right. You're right.
That's
And
kinda
what
how
they
it is
talk
in the
about
city,
Italian.
too.
Yeah,
This
it's true.
in New York, a lot of people like I know, obviously with being involved in dance, like a lot of people that I know that live in the city and dance in the city, they don't have cars. They just move amongst mass transport, and
Mhm.
that's just how it is. Like that's
Yeah.
just life.
That sounds so cool to me.
It's
you
a
know, you could, like,
cool-
Yeah.
adventure, explore, you know.
But another cool part about having a car is that like we can be like, oh, you know what? Like I just want to like today I'm feeling like I want to go pick up and I'm gonna go see something, and you can.
Yeah.
We have the ability to go as far west, as far
I'm gonna go
east,
to Maryland.
south,
Yeah.
north.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So it's like that in itself is also amazing that we
Yeah.
have that opportunity to go do that.
But
and-
at the loss of, you know, community and
Yeah.
being able to, you know.
Yeah.
talk to
So,
people.
I myself am like I love Jersey. Like I love our people here. Like I don't want to get out. What ties you into Jersey so much? Like what do you love about here?
Okay, so I ended up here by accident. I was just telling when I was coming in, I told Mrs. Gasuba, I was like, you know what? I have 51 states to choose.
Yeah.
You know, I had a choice, you know, and I hate the cold. So I don't know what I'm doing here. She just laughed. Actually, it was because of my first husband. He lived in Middletown.
Okay.
I actually came here when I came to the United States. I was living with my sister in Manhattan. And then I moved with my aunt in the Bronx, and I lived there for a little bit. I met my husband, you know, we started dating, then eventually we got married. I moved into, you know, Middletown.
Mhm.
And I love this area. I tell my husband all the time, it's a beautiful area. Like you actually, when you start driving on, you know, on, I don't know, if you take any
35.
any
Ocean Ave.
any of
Oh,
those
yeah.
bridges that go into any body of water.
Yeah, like Ocean
It
Ave.
is just
Yeah,
so
yeah.
beautiful. Any
Yeah.
town, you can go on to Romson, you can go on to like the Long Branch section, you can go on to, you know, down in Point Pleasant, and you go on to any body of water. It's just absolutely gorgeous. It's such a beautiful area. And a lot of people don't know that about Jersey. I feel that we have a really bad name because, you know, the airport is in Newark, and Newark is a city, and
Yeah.
it has a lot of, doesn't have that many open spaces and why not. So when I say I live in New Jersey, my friends in Ecuador think, oh, okay, ew.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I'm like, no, like it's beautiful. It's a
beautiful.
Everybody
beautiful
envisions
area.
like North Jersey, you know, as
North
Yeah.
Jersey's packed. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Exactly.
so
And
and
packed.
there's like black like smog and like smoke everywhere. All,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
factories
It's just like
working.
the spillover from people going to the city every day.
Yeah,
Like people that work in
yeah.
the city. There's people that live in like Hoboken, and
Yeah.
like that's how they get to the city. Is they just live
Exactly.
in North
South
Jersey.
Jersey isn't that great either.
Yeah, South
okay, I
Jersey's
guess
not
we're-
great 'cause
we're
then
like
you
in
go-
the perfect spot.
It's
I
like
guess in this
Camden's
area.
down
Yeah,
there
yeah,
by,
yeah.
and then you're by Philly.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like we're in the perfect
yeah,
in between.
we are.
And
That's
we're
nice.
so east that we get the beautiful atmosphere being right by the water, and
Exactly.
Exactly, and that's, you know, that's one of the things that I think we take for granted sometimes. However, the only thing that keeps me here right now, I would say, is my house.
Mhm.
You know, because I invested in my house so much at this point, and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not ready to let it go. I put so much love into that house, and I put so much work into that house. It breaks my heart to think to get rid of it
Yeah.
at any point, or rent it for somebody to come and do something to my house. Like that's my baby. So I really take care of, like, I'm always doing something to her. I call her, so you know.
Yeah.
I talk to her.
she have a name.
Yeah. No, I haven't named her anything, but I talk to her, and I defend her from my husband's bad taste of like trying to put like a pillow and stick tile on it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it's okay, baby. I hug the walls. I'm like, it's okay. He's never gonna do that to you. You know, I talk to her.
Yeah.
So yes, it breaks my heart to think about letting her go. That's one thing, but my kids are moving. I have one in Texas. So she just moved. She got married not too long ago. And the other one is in North Carolina. I just
Yeah.
went to visit her not too long ago. And I think eventually I'm going to be moving down following where my kids are.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to be away from your children. So
I get that.
Yeah.
So
So
somewhere
I'm
right in
thinking-
between where it's nice and warm, you know, a good distance from both of them.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking eventually I'm going to be going down south. But right now, what it really keeps me here are two very important people. My sister, she's in the nursing home. She loves the place where she's at. And I don't have the heart to take her out of that place and put her somewhere else because she will be very disturbed about it.
Yeah.
And my mom, she's 80. And I do believe strongly that when you're in a very old, a much older age, changing an environment that drastically, it's really bad for your mental health.
Yeah, yeah.
And we had my grandmother and my aunt who just passed away from dementia and Alzheimer's. So I don't want to trigger anything. Like I'm terrified to trigger anything that will take their minds off because, you know, I'm changing their environment so badly. So
Yeah.
I would say I stay here until the day that both of them leave this world because I don't have the heart to take them away. So, yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, you have such a great community here, especially at Ocean Township. I mean,
And I love my job.
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And you're great.
I forgot to mention that.
Yeah. You're
Yes.
great at your job. I
Oh,
mean,
thank you.
You made the way you taught my class last year. For preface, I was not in the advanced Spanish class last year, but I was in, when you get to that level of Spanish and you're not taking like Spanish for advanced, you could take Miss Lauterwasser's amazing Spanish conversation class.
Composition, yeah.
And I would say it's, for me at least, less composition, more conversation.
Yeah.
And it was conversations that weren't even just in Spanish. It was conversations about things that needed to happen in the world with integration of native people coming to America. So I feel like those conversations and those talks we had in class about just like cultural things about like Spanish speaking and everything involved with them coming here, and I just thought it was so amazing, and it opened my mind from thinking, because Spanish, when if you're not super invested in it, is hard to like, it's hard to put your all into it. But when it's like, I'm very interested in like cultural studies. Like my mom was an anthro major, and I want to integrate anthropology into my like college like career. Like I might want to minor in it, do something along those lines. I feel like last year's class, being able to talk about those cultural differences and all of these things that we've talked about in this podcast, I feel like that was something that your class last year really provided me with, and I thought it was an amazing thing to have.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's good to hear that.
Yeah, it was great.
Both your class and Ms. Tavar's class, I think it's very important, you know, the integration of actually learning about the culture, you know, because that's what makes, you know, not only like it makes learning the language interesting, because then when you go to that area where you have to actually speak the language, or you meet someone from that area and you have to speak Spanish, you know, you can learn more about the culture, you can actually experience it, you know, and learn more about the world, you know, so.
Yeah, it's true.
Have you ever gone on the Spanish trip that they do? So like where they go, Costa Rica, Belize, or wherever they go?
No,
You've never gone?
I haven't, no. I believe you have to get, in order for you to go as a chaperone, you have to get like 10 or 12 kids in. And I'm a terrible salesman. I'm terrible at selling anything. And you can't catch me trying to like sell you a trip that costs like $2,000. I'm like, oh, but this kid is gonna have to work, and it's gonna be so much time on his time. Like, I start thinking. I'm an overthinker. So yes, that stops me from a lot of things. I'm an overthinker. I'm working on it. I'm still working on it. Getting better, but yes. I am not good at doing that, and then paying for it is just too expensive. I haven't done any of that traveling, but I have gone to the ones that she does, to like New York City, they go to like the restaurant and why not. Yes, I have done those before.
I think that's an amazing thing that language puts on in general, like all these trips, and like I feel like you guys in language are very good with like really like putting it down, like we're doing this, and like
it's the best way to experience it.
Yeah.
Seriously, like even if you go into like a Spanish speaking restaurant, like then there is that exposure to the culture, because culture comes in food. Like I love food. So food is the one thing that you can experience the culture in the most authentic way, I would
Yeah.
say. You know, the flavors, you know, the way they put things, and there is actually plates that have history behind it.
Yeah.
You know, like the arroz con moros. That's what something we call the rice and beans in my country. Arroz con moros. And why it's called arroz con moros? Because moro is the word that you would give it, and this is going to sound terrible, but that's just, we are very unfiltered culture, so we call it as it is. The moros is the name that they used to give to the people from Morocco when they lived in Spain for so long, so they have darker skin. So yes, those beans are called moros because of the skin of the people from Morocco, and that's what they gave it a name. So it's like, I always tell my kids all the time, it's not that we're racist when it comes down to calling things, it's just that we call things the way they are, and we don't have shame talking about skin color. To us, that's not offensive at all. So, and as a matter of fact, if you go to Latin America, they will give you a nickname based on what you look like. And to somebody from this culture would be highly insulting. But if you're a little chubby, they call you gordita, which means little fatty one. Like,
chunky,
what?
yeah.
If they call you, you know, if you're older, they call you vieja, you know, like old hag. Like, there is so many things that can be highly insulting to people who don't know the culture.
Yeah.
But it's not that they do it from a point of like trying to embarrass you. It's a point of love. When they accept you, they start calling you these little nicknames that are based on what you look like.
Yeah.
Based on, like, I was la negra. I was the black one for my father.
Yeah.
Because I was the one with the darker skin out of all of his children. So yeah, all of them were white, and I was the one with the darker skin. So I was la negra, and that would be highly insulting here. And on my country, that wasn't. It was like an honor to be called that. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm different. You know, so it's a very contradicting culture, I would say.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying.
It's very contradicting because at the same time, you know, there is the issue with the special education kids, like I was mentioning before, and you know that we don't celebrate that kind of difference. You know, it's weird. It's really strange.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Good.
I mean, yeah, this was an amazing episode. I'm so happy that we got to talk about all these things. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
It was fun.
Amazing guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.